It's our community. I'm Mary Davidson, and I'm so glad you're here. Actually, you may know this neighbor that we have visiting today. Her name is Laura McConwell, and she is mayor of Mission, Kansas. So some of you, I'm sure, live in Mission, and you know Laura. Some of you know Laura that don't live in Mission either. I'm sure you.
I would assume so.
She practices law with her father. She is a golfer, and she golfs with him and with her children, and she is mayor of a very interesting city.
Yes, thanks for having me today, Mary.
Oh, I'm delighted. You said that you don't like to do things, quote, the same old way. Talk about that. What is the same old way in Mission that you're trying to get away from?
Well, we probably need to roll back the clock 10 years for when I first became mayor. Mm-hmm. And we, in the first year, we realized we were having a lot of redevelopment that was on the brink. We had a number of businesses that were owned by aging proprietors who really didn't have exit strategies, and so...
In other words, the whole city was turning.
The whole city was turning. I mean, we had old infrastructure, we had a lot of old businesses, and all of that is really wonderful because it's helped with the stability of Mission, but the infrastructure needed work. We also needed to make sure as things redeveloped, we had a community conversation about, do we want to have development happen the way we want it to happen, or do we want to let development happen to us? And so we started this community engagement, which really hadn't been done, where we tried to engage everyone in the community to come up with a vision.
In other words, you were trying to teach them city planning.
Pretty much. Well, and it was a city conversation.
Uh-huh.
I always tell folks it's not my city, it's our city, and all of us need to have our voices be heard so that we can have a good result in the end.
How do you talk to a group like that so that you don't appear that you're entirely gloom and doom and money is running out like water and things need to be done and oh lordy, what are we going to do?
Well, overall in Mission, we've been very stable. We've had healthy accounts and a healthy fund balance throughout the years.
But you're getting ready to change the game.
We have been changing the game. And when Sylvester Powell was mayor, he liked to pride himself on the amount of money that we had in the bank. Well, we still have that same amount of money in the bank. We just have a lot of it encumbered, and we've had to get our arms around some failing infrastructure, both the streets, the sidewalks. One of the things that's turned is through a lot of the years when Sylvester was mayor, people were, the community was spreading out, people were moving out of Mission, and to save money, things were done on the cheap. Yeah. But what I have found and what was sort of left with us is when you do things on the cheap, then it can be more expensive to fix.
My mother always said, Miss Mayor, that you get what you pay for.
That's correct. And so one of the things that we've tried to do, one of the different things, is we try to look at the long-term cost of something. Exactly. Not only the upfront expense, but also what the long-term expense is going to be to our community.
How did the city folks take all this?
Well, it was really, they took it really well.
Did they?
And with the visioning process that we did, Mission's someplace that's about 22-23% senior. And so we've been called the city of the newlywed and the nearly dead. Because when people start having families frequently, they move from Mission, and then when their children leave the home, a lot of those folks move back to Mission. And then there are some people that have stayed in Mission all the way through. And one of the things throughout all the visioning that we did, and we engaged hundreds and thousands of people throughout the process, both people that lived in Mission, that were property owners in Mission, that worked in Mission, that were employed in Mission.
How long did this conversation take?
Well, the original visioning probably was over a course of a period of 6 months. Uh-huh. And it was really started to look at our business district. Mm-hmm. And when those consultants left, they left us with a laundry list of things to do.
Yeah. And all with the price tag.
All with the price tag. Yes. So we looked at the list, and we basically then shifted the list, so we saw, okay, what wasn't going to cost us any money versus the expensive high-ticket items. And we decided we'd start chipping away at the things we knew we could do and that we didn't need money to do necessarily.
But I want to pull out a thread. When you said before, when you wanted to change directions in Mission, the question was, shall we make the decision or shall the decision be made for us?
That's correct.
And that is the important phrase, in my opinion, because when you make the decision, the policy is in place and the long-term goal is in place.
And that's what we tried to do with our visioning. We wanted to look down the future, and we wanted to create sort of a level playing field so that the community had a say in what was happening, and then people coming in to want to invest their dollars in Mission would know what the rules are. And they knew that if they came in and they followed what those rules were, then it was something that would be embraced by the community.
Well, and you're talking about a couple of things too. You're talking about building consensus.
Yes.
And you're selling stock in the corporation.
Yes.
And all of these people that had input in this consensus building process own stock in the corporation, which is Mission, Kansas.
That's right. And you want your residents to be able to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. And we're at a point now, that was 10 years ago when we started that visioning, that we probably need to do a revisit the vision and revisit the community conversation. As with anything, there's always a group that may not appreciate what you're trying to do or accomplish.
Well, and you also said that you want to preserve the small town feel. And I would submit to you that the cities, the conglomeration of cities that we have in Johnson County, they're all different.
They are.
And they all have their particular signature.
Yes.
And talk about Mission and how it's different and the signature that you think it has. Because I think it is very different than the others.
I like to say, that Mission, we're sort of cowboys, and not necessarily that you have people riding horses, although we did have horses in Mission, but you have a lot of people with independent thought and a lot of different ideas that take a lot of pride in Mission. And Mission, I've always said, is a town and a metroplex, because we have the commercial area that's surrounded by residents, and so you really don't need to leave the boundaries of Mission, even though we're only 2.7 square miles, to get everything that you need. And people go to our grocery stores, they go to our restaurants, they do neighbor on neighbor, and those are things that people wanted as we went through the visioning process. So they
did not want to lose that.
They did not want to lose that. They wanted the sidewalks, they wanted streets that people could get out and walk on, that neighbors could get out and talk, and they wanted more green space in our downtown area. Because in Mission, pretty much anybody could walk to our downtown area. You don't need to get in a car to walk down there, but some folks can't because of some crumbling streets and sidewalks. And those are the types of comments that I will hear from residents that now that we've been working on our street plan, is we need to get these things fixed. And we have some in our community that are disabled and that are wheelchair bound, and so getting around on those streets and sidewalks, it's important to have them be in good shape and good condition.
But you know what's so interesting, Laura, is that visioning it can be done in 6 months, but the execution is still going on 10 years later. It takes a while to get everything done.
Well, the funny thing about the vision, when they came and they worked on the list, we were really thinking that, okay, where do we want to go? And at the time, we didn't know that change would be happening as soon as it did. We really thought change would be happening 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And after we came up with a vision and we divided up our downtown, our business district, and started working in those plans and the zoning and all sort of that, boring, it was sort of boring, but we still had lots of public input and forums throughout the process. The owners of the former Mission Mall decided that they wanted to sell. They didn't want the Mission Mall anymore.
Was that 10 years ago?
That was, let's see. That was about 9 years ago.
See, it was beginning to go downhill at that point.
That's right. And when we had the consultants come to work on our visioning, Mission Mall wasn't originally part of it. Our big impetus was what was happening along the west edge, along Metcalf, where Herff Jones was, because they were going to be we knew they were going to be consolidating to one location. We had a JCPenney place that it was a call center, and then it had gone vacant. We knew that there was some change in a number of those businesses. And
but you know what? I want to interrupt just a minute. Mission Mall is not Mission. Mission is small business people.
Mission is when people think about Mission, they frequently think about what's going on Johnson Drive. And one of the things that we try to be careful of is that delicate balance of our merchants along Johnson Drive, as well as maybe our merchants that don't generate sales tax that create jobs. Because we have Script Pro that's off of Johnson Drive that is a very, very large international business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those employees frequent our shops that are on Johnson Drive. And
it's important that those small business people survive.
Well, it is. And it's interesting with those small business people, because if you go block to block, the different business owners have different attitudes about what we should be doing on Johnson Drive.
I'm sure. Building consensus is not always easy.
And it's difficult. And right now, next year, we're going to be redoing Johnson Drive. Johnson Drive is essentially a 2-lane brick road that got paved over. And so there are a number of easements. I mean, when they originally widened Johnson Drive, they didn't go get the easements that were needed in the property division from some of the businesses along Johnson Drive. And so actually there are some people's legal description that go out into through the first lane of traffic.
Well, and the utility easements must be in the middle of the street.
There are a number of utility. Yeah. There's no stormwater conveyance system under Johnson Drive. Uh-huh. And that's been really complicated, that's something that has been a number of years in the making. And we had a downtown visioning committee made up of residents and businesses and property owners, so that we could get a consensus on what we needed to do at Johnson Drive and what it needed to look like, and then figuring out how to pay for it.
That's right. Well, since you're in the redo business here, what's going to happen to the Mission Mall site that's surprisingly empty?
Yes, it has been empty. It's owned by a group called the Cameron Group, and they are out of East Syracuse, New York, and that developer is working very diligently in creating a mixed-use development, which is what is required under our
when you say
code.
Mixed use, you're talking about housing as well?
There'll be housing, and there'll be retail and office, all mixed in. He has a museum-quality aquarium. He has a hotel. What's caused probably the most furor right now is that his latest large tenant is Walmart that he's secured.
I read that in the paper, yeah.
Our neighbor in Roland Park isn't real thrilled about that, but that was something that was a complete private transaction.
Well, and as I understand it, that Walmart is going to be different than any of the others because they have agreed to go down.
They're going to go down and be on the bottom level of the development.
For the old Macy's store. No.
Well,
what was under
it? If you remember what it originally was when it was Myron Green's.
That's
and all
right. That's right. I have forgotten. Yeah.
Well,
I remember that.
It'll go down,
But that's different for
on
Walmart.
That corner. It is different for Walmart. It will be, and then it will be covered by the center, and so they will have additional retail and office and the housing and.
I think that. And what is the estimated date of completion of that?
Well, once they break ground, it's going to take them probably 1.5 to 2 years to complete the entire site. So they're still working on numbers, and the aquarium is Star Bond eligible, as is the hotel and a few of the other amenities. And so we're working with the Department of Commerce. It was Star Bonds were granted several years ago, but because some of the cost of construction's come down, the project shifted. They're reworking.
And that's a major help. Well, I have a question. Mission is landlocked.
Yes.
2.7 miles. How do you create growth where there isn't any room to grow?
Well, with density, which was part of the thing we worked on with the vision. And so because we're landlocked, we have to be very careful about what goes on our property. And the Gate was a perfect example, because when the original owner of the mall site first approached that I knew they were trying to sell it was when they came in and said that Walmart was interested in purchasing it, and they wanted to put in a large big box store, which would have sprawled and taken up the entire site, which doesn't conform with the community vision, and it's not a very good use of the land in a landlocked community.
No.
So what we're doing is we're going up. And along the way, we've had to make sure that our infrastructure supports that.
That's right.
That density.
Got to have those sewer pipes.
That's it. Yeah, I've learned more about wastewater and stormwater than I ever thought I would.
Well, slurry's not a very interesting subject, but it's awful when it comes up to the top.
Well, you got the slurry seals and the overlay and the chip and seal. So.
I want to talk to you about policy, because policy is so important to the mayor, to the city council, and to the citizens of Mission. You have a policy that I want to use as an example, and that has created a lot of furor, and that's your driveway tax.
The transportation utility fee.
Yes, see, and everybody calls it the driveway tax because that is the sobriquet that has been attached to that. And talk about what it really is.
All right. To get to what the transportation utility fee is, that also was a journey. The number one thing on the surveys over the last years, and I told you about it in the beginning with the visioning, is our infrastructure and a lot of the failing infrastructure. And we had a lot of streets that needed to be redone. And it continually came in as the number one thing that residents and businesses wanted us to look into. So once we had some engineers come in and do a survey, an inventory of our streets, because I can look at it, but I'm not an engineer. And once we had that done, then we had to look at, all right, how are we going to pay for it? And had to look at different options.
That phrase keeps coming up. How are we going to
pay for it?
Yeah.
That's right. So, some traditional ways are through the mill, and that's where you just increase property values. The roads were originally put in many times by assessment. And if we just take Johnson Drive, if you started assessing those small business owners along Johnson Drive, they couldn't absorb that.
They couldn't do it.
Sales tax. Sales tax is great, but with our Moody's, they didn't want us to be, completely sales tax reliant.
Well, and it's easy to go someplace just within a couple of miles where they don't have that extra sales tax.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, in looking at all of those, the transportation utility fee was brought to our attention because most of us in Johnson County have a stormwater utility fee, and that's a user-based fee.
Yeah.
And so in exploring this, we spent about a year exploring the transportation utility fee, and it's a user-based fee. And so when you look at it, the people that put the least impact on the road are the residents. And we have, when we looked at the different houses, we decided we weren't going to decide, square footages on houses. Yeah. We were just going to do all the residents a flat fee. And then when we look at the commercial properties, they had different uses and different sizes. And
don't you think, though, that I want to insert a question here. Don't you think that user-based fees are where many cities, municipalities are going?
Well, I think so, and I think it's
they
also
call them different things.
Well, they call them different things, but it's sort of a consumption, and a user-based is.
Well, it does spread the responsibility around.
Well, it does, and so what we did then was we had a number of public forums, and because the first thing we wanted to, after the word driveway tax was coined, we had public forums where we discussed, is this still a priority? Are the streets a priority? Because if they're not a priority, we don't really need to get to the second step on how to pay for them.
Well, that's right. And I want to go through, what you're saying is the process of making public policy is complicated. It takes time. It takes a lot of thought. And it takes a lot of people inputting. I call it making sausage.
Well, it is. It's
all
messy.
This stuff goes into the grinder, and then something comes out in the form of public policy, and this is the tax that we're talking about here.
Some of the complaints of folks that didn't like the transportation utility fee were that they wanted to be able to vote on it. And in our Kansas Constitution doesn't provide a mechanism for them to vote. And because some of those same people said that they supported it, they liked it, it made a lot of sense, but they wanted even more citizen input.
Buy into it. But what you're dealing with is not only the present but the future.
That's right.
And you're also dealing with the past, because you made the comment that you're dealing with the corners that were cut 30 or 40 years ago. And so the past catches up with you, and then as you plan for today, you have to plan for the future.
Well, and some of that infrastructure is older than that. And I mean, in many ways it's failing. We had a street that failed the other day, and when we went and looked at it, it had been backfilled with gravel underneath it, which is just a recipe for disaster on streets. And so we have to immediately look to take care of that, because that's those are public safety issues.
But so many things go into the decision. That's what
I
find just
there are a lot of things. And getting back to the transportation utility fee, what we decided when we looked at our road plan is that we would ask the voters for a 1/4-cent sales tax. We would use the transportation utility fee, and we'd use the special highway fund that we get from the state already, and so that we would spread that cost of the streets over everyone.
Finding the money to pay for it.
Well, that's it. And with that also, a number of properties that don't ordinarily pay mill, or you don't ordinarily pay the mill, also contribute. If we raise the mill, we almost double our mill if we use the mill to replace a transportation utility fee. And
do you know how much 1 mil raises, or a quarter of a mil?
Well, we raised, the transportation utility fee raises about 800 and some thousand dollars, and that would be about 7 mils.
Okay. Well, see, that's, I mean, when you have to translate it into the bottom line that people understand.
Is,
yeah, and that's
if we did that with a resident who right now pays $72 a year for the transportation utility fee, if we needed to raise the mill, the smallest house would probably go up to $150, $200. And yeah, I don't know. Interesting
it's a
thing.
small price to pay to live in a city like Mission, Kansas.
Well, it is.
Well, it is.
It is.
We're all fortunate.
And
we
you know, we're
are.
not a green field. You know, in Mission,
No.
it's not like we're going out and we have this green field that we go ahead and set our infrastructure and pave it. We have to take the stuff out. We have to fix whatever the mistakes were.
Well, you have to replace the old with the new, partly because that's what municipalities do, but partly because you're landlocked.
That's correct.
So you have a double whammy there. Outside of Mission Mall, you have about 4 other big projects going. What are they?
We do. We have a project going on the west end of town that's called Mission Crossing, and it's along Metcalf, and it's going to be a mixed use. It's going to have a senior living. It's going to have some retail.
Everything is mixed use now.
Yeah, retail, and it'll have. It's in our west gateway, which has a form-based code, and so the developer came in and complied with the code. We also have street projects. We have our Martway and Broadmoor, which are big commercial corridors, and as well as Johnson Drive. And once we get through the Johnson Drive project, I think we'll see a lot of changes on Johnson Drive because a number of businesses are concerned about the construction.
Well, and they should be, because it does hurt. But I also think that once Johnson Drive gets up to speed, the area around Broadmoor, because it needs work as well.
Absolutely.
And that will follow close behind.
And I've made a pledge to the businesses, and I keep telling staff to help me out on this, is that we'll always have 2 lanes of traffic open so that there's always access into the businesses.
You know, and this is another area of planning when you redo, how to keep the traffic moving.
Yes.
So think of the numbers of people and the amount of brains that go into the successful completion of a project that is always going on in these cities. There's something always going on.
That's it. Well, and also to be able to have a point person so the businesses know who to come to get answers to their questions. And our project, when we worked on Johnson Drive at the East End, we had a project manager who then would go into the different businesses and give them updates on what's going to happen and what's coming up. And so we have a website, wedigmission.com.
Communication is so
we
important.
really try to have that communication.
How accessible are you as
Well,
mayor?
my office is in Mission and City
Your
Hall.
law office is?
My law office is. And so, I mean, I'm very accessible. People can find me anywhere, and they do. And I get people that send me criticism. I also get people that send compliments. So it just.
How do you
never
handle
really know.
the mail? However you get it, the email or the tweets or the Twitters or whatever you
Well,
call
and
it. How do you answer? How do you do that? I mean, that's
I need to get
overwhelming.
more technologically savvy, but it's difficult because I generally return emails and sometimes with letters I phone call as opposed to just writing a letter back. And sometimes people don't want responses. Sometimes I get mail that has no return address. They don't want to respond. And then there are some that are, they just send suggestions, and so it just really ebbs and flows.
But the point is that you are accessible. You do answer your mail.
I do.
And you
And I do invite people and encourage them to come to our public forums and public meetings.
Do you have a good turnout usually?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
It really depends.
On what the subject is.
It depends on what the subject is. Sometimes people that are angry come out, and people that are happy the way things are going don't.
You talk about taking risks with the city. How risk averse are you, or how do you decide whether or not to take that risk?
It really boils down to if it's the right thing to do. Like with taking care of the streets and the infrastructure, that's a big job. That's quite a bit of money, but it's something that we have to do for the viability of our community into the future. We have lessons of municipalities around us that didn't take care of their infrastructure and they fell into disarray and blight. I don't want Mission to be that kind of a story.
No, but those are necessities. Do you ever have something that comes up that's not a necessity, but it would be a very nice addition to the city, but it's somewhat risky?
Well, we will, it's sort of hard when you talk about risky. I suppose when we look at expanding the green space, or maybe land banking, purchasing some parcels to have them, because we know maybe development's going to happen in the future, so that we can make sure we have parcels accumulated. Those are risky type of propositions.
What are your plans for the future of Mission that we might be able to be the first to know about?
Oh gosh.
What do you want? What do you want? You're going to be
in
mayor for a while. What?
Well, you know, I've told people I don't want to beat Sylvester's record, because I think one of the exciting things.
He was what, 35 years?
He was mayor for 35 years, and most
everybody
recently,
knew him. And,
yeah, he was 25. And you know, I've really tried to turn a lot of the work over to staff and to council and to a lot of the residents, because that's how you get the buy-in, that's how you get things done, and that's when people are happy and proud of their communities, when they feel like they've also had a hand in what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. But every mayor has a will. And in your will, what will you leave to the next mayor?
Well,
what would you like to leave to them?
You know, I'm going to call it, for lack of a better word, sort of a cleaned up city. When I became mayor, we had spot zoning and we had sort of fractured ordinances, and I think I'm going to have left the next mayor with, you know, we're on our way with our stormwater, we're on our way with that infrastructure, we've leveled the playing field, and so. And then when we have Johnson Drive done, that's just going to be kind of ripe for the picking. Our next area probably is figuring out, you know, some of the marketing or economic development with Mission. We've been so busy with taking care of, you know, these important infrastructure needs. We haven't been able to do some of the fun and sexy things.
Well, and that's something that you can start and perhaps leave to somebody else. You also have protected the small business people, and I think that's extremely important. And you continually try to do that and to create an atmosphere that they can flourish.
Well, yes, we do, and give them an opportunity to share their opinions and voice their concerns. And we also have some grants that are called BIG, and those are improvement grants that the small businesses can use to upgrade, like their windows or their awnings and their signage.
It's nice to do business when you walk into a store and they greet you by name, and you feel like that makes a family.
Yes, it does.
And I just, and the reason I ask you was because I think that Mission, of all the municipalities, is so interesting because it is so many things in that 2.7 square miles. I mean, that's just an amazing thing, and Mission is lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
I think so. And I you know, 4 years ago, Laura McConwell was Kansas Mayor of the Year. That must have been a wonderful thrill.
It was. It was nice to be selected amongst my peers.
Well, that's right. And they're all nice people. So I'm so glad that you could join us today and meet Laura McConwell. She is mayor, and her city is Mission, Kansas. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Mayor McConwell. It was a true pleasure. We'll see you soon. It's our community, you know.